Pontus Stråhlman. I'm really happy to be asked to have this educational session with you. I used to be a board member and vice chairman of Followon. I suppose that is why I've been called here. Now in a new venture capital fund, so I'm actually jumping off the business angel activities and starting then to invest through a fund. It was actually Torsti Tenhunen, who was the chairman of Followon, who asked me to join this fund. And after thinking about the business idea a while, you know, when I had been doing angel investing with my own money, now I would start investing with someone else's money. It actually sounded like a good business idea. So that's my current situation. My background is that I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've founded 4 companies. I've been also active in a family business. I've sold those shares. I've made enough so that I can be a business angel. I've done 10 investments. I always try to be active in my investments. I usually take the lead investor role in them. I think that being active and working for the startups is a good way also to keep up your own skill set. So that's why I encourage every one of you also to be active when you are investing into startups. So a few words about, you know, the situation where we are entering into a startup. It is, of course, in the very, very early stages. First, of course, you have friends, family, and fools who are investing into young companies, and directly after them comes the business angels. The thing is, of course, what makes it a bit scary even to be a business angel is that you never know if you are a business angel, because you might be a fool. So you have to work hard and see to it that you are actually a business angel, and you'll know in approximately 10 years' time whether you are actually a business angel or a fool. I'm really happy, super happy to be asked here to do this presentation. I don't have any positive exits yet. The reason why I guess they think that I'm not a fool is that a lot of VCs have come, invested in my startups after me, and the valuations have gone pretty well. So on paper, at least, I'm not a fool, but a business angel. And I guess that's good enough then to come here and talk about my experiences. I do value your experiences as well. I believe that a lot of you guys have an entrepreneurial background as well, and I'm sure that a lot of you have been building teams also. So please, let's make this an interactive session and do talk about your experiences as well. But so, we come in here, right in the beginning of the valley of death. The valley of death, of course, is a place where you only lose money and you actually have no certainty for when you will start making money. The fun part of it, being a business angel, is even that usually we come into a company and the burn rate only increases, which means that when we put in money, they start spending money. So it's of course a bit of a scary place, not just for the entrepreneurs, but for the investors as well. One thing though is this, bottom out. Because when we have reached this place, we have basically reached a product market fit. It's not necessarily defined that way, but let's assume that it happens somewhere around this point when we start to becoming less and less cash flow negative. The good thing about reaching this point here at the bottom of the valley of death is that we get a lot more interest from early VC. Now, I definitely don't say that it should be the target of all startups to get VC funding if they have angel funding. That's another topic for another educational session. But as a financier of a startup, it always sort of makes me feel a bit better if I know that you have a good chance of getting early VC money into your startup. And then you can like feel that it is your choice whether or not you want to do future financing rounds. Now, of course, only once you have sort of come to the break-even point and you start to becoming heavily cash flow positive, then you can actually start merger and acquisition talks. Now, this is not a definite rule, of course, not by any means. I'm sure that there are a lot of M&A activity happening already with negative companies. But in a normal business angel case, we work with companies that are making losses. And once we've sort of reached a level of profitability, then we can start perhaps thinking about exit at some point. Even though this is, of course, then quite often a sort of very good goal for many startups, right? The tricky part is that according to many smarter people than me, the number one reason for startup failure is premature scaling. Which means that now when you have entered this place and you're walking here in the valley of death, according to these guys, you should not still put all your money into sales. You should not try to reach sales as much as possible, even though the logical conclusion, or at least the first logical conclusion, would be that by putting a lot of all your efforts into sales, you would actually come faster to this point. The reason is that every startup has a goal to build a fantastic product. And I know that that's not what it used to be. As an entrepreneur, I was in sales. And I can confess, as I was a distributor, you know, I had my principals and they manufacturers, and they manufactured whatever they did, and it was my job to sell whatever they manufactured. So I have sold quite a lot of crappy stuff in my days. I have to admit it. Now, if you're selling something that is a crappy, you can always find different kind of motivations why the customer should still buy that crappy product. Price can be one. It can be so cheap because it's crappy that it still does what it does best for the customer. Or then it can have a nice color or whatever. But then I've also sold really, really cool stuff. And it's so much more fun. And to increase sales, if you have a really, really cool product, is so much easier, is so much more fun, and is so much more doable for a small Nordic startup than selling something that is crap. That even smarter people than me think that the first goal of any startup is to make a product that users love. So this is like an introduction to the situation where we are entering the startup and where we will start then to support the startup team. I've gathered a few data to like build a framework around it. Now, I found this, I did some Googling, and I found that on average, according to PitchBook, the latest data is that there are 2.1 angel rounds and about 3 years on average in the US until a startup with an angel investment gets VC money. Not an exit by any means, but VC money. And in a way, I hope, of course, that when you go and invest into a startup, you want to work there forever. But I'd want every lead investor, any business angel, to at least kind of think that on a minimum, they will support the startup until they get some new financiers. And I think that that's kind of a good starting point when you do a new investment and you want to be the lead angel and you want to be there working for the startup. Then, on average, you should be prepared to spend at least 3 years with the startup. Now, of course, that's different from the exit, but that's kind of the lead angel role. Then, of course, each angel, someone has said that you should try and build a portfolio. And a small portfolio of startups is, in my opinion, 10 startups. And then, if I still threw in a few numbers, a FIBAN angel, I'm sorry I don't have the SBAN numbers here, but a FIBAN angel makes on average a 20,000 euro investment into a startup, and he makes 25% annually. Now, that means that when you're going to work for a company or startup, you're going to have to be prepared to do it for 3 years, earn approximately 5,000 euros per year per company on average, and you should have a portfolio of 10 of these companies. Now that sort of places the framework in how much effort should you as a business angel put in the company. Now in my opinion, 5,000 euros, it's not too much, but it's definitely something. So now that you have a syndication and you've actually even chosen a startup, congratulations. I don't know how you've agreed on these kind of things, but I hope that you've gone through and discussed with Heidi, who I understood is the lead angel, some kind of framework into how much time and energy she will put for this startup, what kind of responsibilities she has, and maybe even some kind of lead angel compensation if you think that roughly 25% yearly on her investment is not good enough compensation for her work.
Did it work in FIBAN, this lead angel compensation and stuff?
Well, I started off doing approximately five investments and didn't take anything. But then I sort of thought that this sucks. And then I started asking. And no one has complained. Actually, my last investment was not, I didn't take the lead investor role in that one. And I insisted that the lead angel gets a compensation. It motivates. And I think that was a fair deal. In my last investment, it was like we agreed on everything. We settled valuation. I thought that it was nice. And we settled what each of us would invest. But then as a last sort of haggling point, I still said to the entrepreneurs, and by the way, this guy is going to be the lead angel, so you need to give 2% extra to him. And they thought it was...
Compensation is 2% of the stock.
Yes, in this case. FIBAN has a rule, or not a rule, sorry, we don't have rules, we have guidelines. We have a guideline for this. I'm sure that they're eager to kind of give that to SBAN as well if they don't already have it for you. And I think that that's roughly in the ballpark where we're talking about.
So it's kind of pre-seed stage and
A pre-seed stage, yes.
and the company gives this, not the investors.
Yes, the company gave. Well, I mean, the company gave it. That's, of course, a philosophical question. The company gave it. Someone could argue, of course, that, we could have just haggled 2% for everyone, right? And then we could have split the 2% amongst everyone, and then it wouldn't have been the company that would have given it, then it would have been the investors who would have given it. So it's more of a philosophical question that who pays, is it the company or the other investors? But in kind of my view, it feels as a good haggling point there, very at the last stage when you agreed on everything, and then you can like morally think that it's the company that pays it. If you think it that way, then that means, right, that my investment is 2% less profitable if we get to an exit, right? If you think of it the other way, that we could have haggled the 2% and shared it between all investors, then actually it depends on the investment, and it could have actually had a significant even impact on the profitability of my investment. But that's funny with math. Sometimes even math is a matter of a viewpoint.
Philosophically, are the Finnish angel investors happy to pay to the lead investor for his job?
They're happy to pay to me. I mean, no one has ever told me that I can't have it. I don't know. Maybe they're not happy to pay for everyone. Oh, you're right. No, they're not always happy. No, I didn't make one investment because they didn't want to give it, and then I was okay, fine. So not always. It's like, you have to prioritize as well. For me, if an average compensation is like that 25%, and then you get make a 20,000 euro investment, then mathematically, on average, you're like gaining 5,000 euros on the first years, and I've been fortunate to be used to a better compensation level than that. So and that's why I think it's only fair to give a lead angel compensation. It is also an official statement of FIBAN that is what we encourage. Because if we think of it the way we do, the way I kind of see it, that if you haggle it very there at the end, then it sort of only means that everyone pays 2%. And a good active lead angel can actually, in my opinion, be very, very valuable for the startup. But that is something that you need to discuss. I mean, this is FIBAN's guidelines. I think actually they had already made that official statement before I entered the FIBAN board. So it has been an official guideline for FIBAN for quite many years. But it's not an everyday topic, so I'm not sure. I don't think we have statistics on lead angel compensation on how often it is used. Now, of course, I'll be a VC, so I can't do that anymore. I actually have a strategy that we will get angel investors as well. And I think that I'll be actually wanting to pay the angel investors maybe not 2%, maybe 1% or something. But some kind of compensation. Because in all honesty, I think that in this last case, for instance, where I did then make sure that my friend, for him, I mean, it was more I did, he wanted an investment, he was an old friend, and he wanted to be a lead angel, and I sort of found a case for him, so he invested 40,000, and I invested only 10,000. So basically what he more or less did was his investment improved by 50%. Whereas my investment only got worse by 2%, if you think about math that way.
How is it in FIBAN? Is there sort of a competition for the lead angels, or do you feel that there are like a few people?
No, actually, I think that one of the sort of reasons why crowdfunding has been growing quite a lot is that people really wouldn't want to take on a lead angel role. They kind of think it's a fun gamble, which is a bit of a shame, because I sincerely hope that you feel that you can add value to your investments. That is the reason why I'm an angel investor in the first place. I mean, sometimes, you know, I did this one investment and I had to sell some shares, and I looked at my stock portfolio and I had to sell some BMW. And I even had made a lot of profit, so I had to pay a lot of tax when I sold off a lot of BMW, just to be able to invest in a Finnish startup. And I kind of made me wonder that why the hell do I invest into startups? But I believe that because I can bring know-how and because I can bring networks, it'll actually be a good investment, even better than BMW. Now, this short introduction became a bit long. I hope you don't mind. The objective of this training is then to give you sort of my best practices, my view of the best practices on how to support startup teams. Then I'll discuss a few of the pitfalls in the relationship between angel investors and the founder teams. And thirdly, we'll talk a bit about the contractual framework with which these relationships between investors, startups, and founders are sort of built upon. The thing is, it is the first Nordic Angel program, so it is the first time I'm having this education. If it's something that you've gone through already, my apologies. Do remember to give feedback. But these are, of course, in my opinion, quite important topics. So doing it perhaps once again is not that bad. Now, after each topic, I sincerely hope that we have a good interactive discussion on those topics, because I seriously do want to hear your views on them as well. So, what makes a winning team? I mean, this is basically any team building, right? I think that diversity, experience, and sector understanding are extremely important. Sometimes I feel age is important, but I'm not sure how age is important. Some study was just released saying that the best and most profitable startups are founded by 42-year-olds. That's fantastic. I still have 2 years left to think about what my startup will be. If it's not this VC, of course, but then. But these are, of course, things that you want to look in your team. And in all honesty, these aren't in any way clear-cut in startups. And you should remember these also when you start building it. Who is the next team member? And is the next team member someone that improves on diversity, experience, sector understanding, and age, if you feel that that is important? Factors that are less important to team dynamics, in my opinion, might be education, nationality, and irrelevant experience. In Finland, we had a lot of Symbian coders starting startups for the last 5 years that I have been doing. And that's a really tough question for me. How do I value an excellent Symbian coder? I mean, that is, you know, the situation. They regard themselves as highly experienced. Quite often I'm unfortunately of the opinion, that it has no value. Whenever I look at an investment now, my minimum requirements are that they need to be able to build a minimum viable product. That is not always the case. Quite often, whenever a startup entrepreneur pitches, they do find angels who are satisfied with outsourcing, for instance, building an app, even though that's your business. For me, I'm not happy with that kind of a setting, simply because this build, measure, learn circle that is so important in startups. And if you have to outsource a significant part of the added value of your startup, then I can't see them innovating fast enough. Or then they would need a hell of a lot of larger resources than to do it with my money. The team must have some kind of sector understanding. I mean, that is really important, and I don't think that teams have enough of it. I have the average age of my startup entrepreneurs, they have been pretty young, I think. Around 30-ish would be my guess. And when they are around 30-ish, in a good case scenario, they might have a 5-year experience or so. But strengthening on that sector understanding is, in my opinion, extremely critical. But in all honesty, it is building teams. So I read this book, Team of Teams, New Rules of Engagement for a Complex World. It's written by an American general. I think it's very fascinating. So if you're interested about team building in general, I think that this could be a good further reading for you.
Why do you think that solo founder is not a good choice?
Well, usually the problems that startups are sort of solving at the moment, they are quite complex. And really having a single founder is difficult in that complexity. Maybe I'm also scared about the sort of dynamic where you have a single owner usually loving that company so much that it's more difficult for them to incentivize others with shares. And I think that is also very important, that you actually do give away shares for your employees, and also that you're willing to sell the company if necessary. So that's just, and also, that's a good question. I put it up there, but usually I might have taken it a bit too granted, because I don't know all the necessary reasons for it. But it does feel better. Any other opinions on this? Should it be a single?
Is it related to growing the company past 15 employees?
Could be.
Cannot actually cope with that many employees.
I always talk about this valley of death, that in Finland we have these excellent single founders who have actually founded really, really excellent companies. But we have these like Tuurin kyläkauppa, I have no idea if you know it. It's a department store in the middle of a field, up in the middle of where there's nothing but fields. And people travel like 200 kilometers to do their daily shopping in that department store. We have, because he's such a powerful entrepreneur, he was able to build that department store in the middle of the field. And I think that is the kind of businesses that single entrepreneurs build. Then if you take teams, I think that the Swedes are kind of like, they build these like Biltema. You know, I don't know if you have Biltema here in Estonia, but the Swedes, they're a lot more braver. We Finns, we tend to think that, you know, you're a tough guy if you're a solo entrepreneur. But in the end, I think that solo entrepreneurs, they don't have the courage to build something that's like international and really big. They want to be, they want to like hold all the control. And then they want to build something super cool, but they'll keep it like that department store in the middle of the field, you know? And that's the kind of businesses that single entrepreneurs build. Stereotypically, perhaps. I don't know. I have invested in single entrepreneurs as well, and I think that they're doing fantastic, but actually only 1 out of 10.
How many employees they have?
I think they have around 8. They're not the fastest growing of my startups, but it's a good startup anyway, definitely.
Can you as an investor take the role of the sort of a sparring partner for the solo entrepreneur or solo founder?
I don't think so. I mean, if you have 10, I mean, yes, definitely that is one of the most important things that you do, but it's kind of, for entrepreneurs, I think that it needs to be so much more than if you have a portfolio of 10 to 20 companies, and you can like call them once a week, and that's good, and I hope you do. But that's not necessarily enough support. It's certainly not nowhere near as much as having a co-founder. So I mean, the framework I tried to paint there in the beginning, that was to set sort of the ideas. You can't be a co-founder in the company. I mean, hell, the founders probably own 40%, and you're paying them money. And you only get what? Out of the 170,000, each one of your shares is what? 1%, I don't know. And the founder gets still, they have like 40 and 40 or something. So you can't be a co-founder. Not with 0.5%. And you don't need to be. You can still have fun, you can still call them every now and then, and you can do a lot of support. But you can't be a co-founder. And I think that this is such a scary place. That it helps if you have, you know, someone to hold your hand. Where were we? Yes. So your first thing, in my opinion, that you do is you support recruiting the right team. The team is not complete, and the team needs to be built, hopefully into the thousands of employees, and the first employees, they are always extremely important. So ask yourself then, what is needed in the team to reach product market fit? I always do the thing that I never ask this question, I always ask, how do we get more sales? But then I always realize in the end it's a wrong question. I should have asked what is needed to reach product market fit. And you realize, of course, that when you are recruiting, it's a completely different recruitment if you ask the founders that what is needed to reach product market fit than if you ask what is needed to increase sales. And that is, of course, one thing where your support is needed and your opinion is needed. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe you should ask them that what is needed to increase sales. But smarter people than me have said that you should ask them what is needed to reach product market fit. Is the team organized to follow lean principles? In Finland, no one understands lean. we always think somehow for some silly reason that lean equals doing everything very, very cheap. If we don't put any money on something because we don't have it, then we're lean. But lean is actually an interesting philosophy. And I guess at the moment still a lot of people think that the lean startup is still an excellent framework for how startups should be organized. So I have put up a reading suggestion for you. It's still relevant, so do read it, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, if you haven't read it already.
Does lean approach, not experimenting things and doing it rapidly and validate, does it work in all types of technologies? Because you started from saying that it's not so easy and motivating to sell some
crappy stuff.
Crap, yeah. Or okay, in some cases, in some technologies, let's say medical, in some fields, it's even dangerous to try out something which is not fine-tuned. You can even end up with paying a very big compensation.
Yeah. That is quite true, and for instance in software development I don't think that lean is the biggest kind of the most modern way of doing software development. But doing the software development part in a startup is different than organizing the startup through a lean principle. And in that sense I do believe that lean is quite important. And how would you kind of, I'm not an expert on lean, even though I have read books on the subject, but kind of the one example that I always talk about lean is that it was invented in a Toyota factory, and the Toyota manual described very scrupulously all responsibility areas. And whenever a mistake happened, the whole factory was shut down and everyone gathered around the mistake to discuss why the mistake had happened.
But isn't this lean different from this idea that you should make the first version?
Yes.
It is an experiment.
Yes.
Isn't it in a way even in contradiction with what you explained about thought?
No, because the experimentation should be systematic.
Yeah.
The experimentation should be systematic. The process as such must live the whole time as that build, measure, learn curve continues. But the sort of build, measure, learn cycle should be very systematic. And usually startups are not systematic. And usually they don't understand me when I, as an investor, ask them, for instance, to actually measure things so that we can systematically develop a product. And they don't understand why that measurement is so important in order to be lean, because their sort of natural instinct is the opposite. That lean is where you don't actually have any systems, but you just do. And in my opinion, the way I understood the lean startup is that you actually need to have a strong system supporting that. And are the team roles optimal? Out of 10 startups, I have only replaced one CEO. So quite often they are, and in that case it was just to replace him to a CTO role. Because we sat down and discussed and we both agreed that he at his heart was a CTO. And then the sales director took on the role as CEO.
This guy also was a founder?
Yes. So I took another founder, put her as CEO.
What do you exactly mean with a team? Is it a team of founders and the key?
Well, at first, of course, but yeah, I mean, and you shouldn't micromanage, so you shouldn't ask if the secretary is doing the right thing. I mean, right? So you should definitely concentrate on key roles. But certainly also, if you have the time and understanding of other key roles. But it is quite often so that the investors, they talk, and the board composition is that of founders and investors. So therefore, the main responsibility is to get those team roles correct. And then, of course, it's case by case how like deep you want to go into different jobs. They have quite often talked to me about coders, about firing sales guys. But in all honesty, I think that a board of director, a lead angel, does not have the capacity or the know-how about why that job is not the right one. So I always try to encourage the founder to kind of like listen to his or her heart and do what feels right. Usually that means that you need to fire those workers. And then I usually kind of like push the founder strongly to fire the workers or give an excellent explanation to the next board meeting of why they didn't fire them. In that case, it kind of like, in my opinion, incentivizes the founder correctly, because it's sometimes for a first-time entrepreneur, a first-time founder, is a really sad thing, firing people. For me as an entrepreneur as well, I mean, those are the things I think were the things that sucked the most, you know, firing people. It wasn't fun. And supporting the founders in making difficult decisions is an extremely important role of the investor.
Is the CEO fully responsible of the kind of management team, the key person?
Well, that's the next, because my next question is, does the team have freedom to operate? Now I really do hope you kind of read that Team of Teams, because it sort of summarizes my philosophy as an investor quite well. It talks about managers being gardeners. They only like water and nourish the plants. But the plants, they need to grow themselves and become beautiful flowers or something. It's a really quite strange picture of management, but I think it's true. I mean, for me, and this is a matter of opinion. Once again, it's important for you to know. I mean, this is not a certain truth that I'm telling you now. This is a matter of opinion. There are those investors who think that startup entrepreneurs need to be guided very specifically towards an end goal. And in that way, they will ensure the highest probability of success. So this, does the team have freedom to operate, is my own philosophical matter of opinion. I think that in order for any founder to build something great, they need to have freedom to operate. And that means that for me, as an angel investor, of course, on the board seat, I try and support and I try and nourish and I try and water the ideas coming out from the founder. But then I try to get anything he or she wants passed. If it's not something completely against, like, you know, our interests. And then, of course, has the team experience in growing a business from 10 to 50 persons? I think that most founder teams can grow a business to perhaps about roughly 10 persons. But after that, the ball game gets quite different. And then you need, as an investor, to be there, because in that place it's really important to like have the courage to discuss those team roles if the person is not the correct person to grow the business from 10 to 50 persons.
I haven't seen VCs often making due diligence on that issue particularly. They look at the financials, all the agreements, etc. But this typically will be absolutely not kind of important or not considered.
There are many VCs who only invest in second-time founders. There are many business angels who only invest in second-time founders. And this is one of the reasons why. Because it kind of is, growing a business is so much different from building an idea and making that idea into a minimum viable product. And that's why there are actually many VCs who only invest in second-time founders. I'm not one of them. I don't know, but I do look for sector understanding, and I do look for special kind of people. But then one way of doing it is just to say that, look, I only invest in second-time founders. Of course, you'll have a lot of work finding good deal flow if you only invest in second-time founders. So whoever has that philosophy must be pretty bold in their statements and certainly not haggle on valuation too much and things like that. But that's, of course, another question. Time is running pretty fast, so use the right KPIs. You're businessmen, hopefully, or probably, many of you. So I'm guessing that you've followed a lot of KPIs. Most of the time, the startup entrepreneurs haven't. And most of the time, in Finland at least, it could be a Finnish thing, I don't know, but the startup entrepreneurs, they really kind of like get annoyed about stuff like accounting, and then metrics is important. And you need, as an investor, to ensure that they are looking at the right metrics. And turnover is not a measurement of customer satisfaction. I know that because I've generated a lot of turnover by selling crappy things. So turnover is not a measurement of customer satisfaction. Then the question is, are you following metrics on customer satisfaction? Because customer satisfaction is still the best indication that you'll get a product market fit. So my favorites, which I try to implement in my startups, customer lifetime value divided by customer acquisition cost. Quite often when I coach at Startup Sauna or some other place, they don't know the customer lifetime value because they're at such an early stage. And I always ask them, but don't you have a vision? Don't you even have a gut feel about what the lifetime value is? And quite often they don't. And I have no idea on how to build, for instance, a go-to-market strategy if you have no idea of the customer lifetime value. And do remember that, I'm not sure how true it is, but it must be somewhere in the ballpark. I read somewhere that Supercell has a customer lifetime value of 24 euros. And 24 euros is peanuts. But if you have a customer acquisition cost that's so much smaller, and you have a fantastic go-to-market strategy, you can build an extremely good, valuable company with a customer lifetime value of 24 euros. So the question is not that that you need to have a high customer lifetime value as such, but in order to actually make a relevant go-to-market strategy, in my opinion, from years of doing sales, if you don't know the customer lifetime value, I have at least no way of building a supportive and long-term go-to-market strategy. And it strikes me as odd that that entire customer lifetime value is something that is not measured and not even seen as something that a startup should start to think about at the very first beginning. Net Promoter Score is something that I very often encourage my startups to consider, because it's so easy. Almost every software, you just ask them one question: with what likelihood would you recommend our service or product to a friend or someone else? And then you have a scale from 0 to 10. It's that easy to collect a Net Promoter Score, yet they most often times don't do it.
What is the good number there?
Well, a positive number is good, because I mean, do you count the Net Promoter Score in a way that you give all numbers from 0 to 6 is negative, -1, and then 0 to 5 is -1, and then 6, 7 is 0, and then 8, 9, and 10 are +1, I think. You can check it up later, and then you add up what your customers are doing. And if you get a number that is positive, then you're actually doing quite good. And then the higher it is, the better. Then you, of course, I mean, you make it into a relative number, so you get a percentage out of it. And then one extremely important thing for an investor is to explain to the founders what follow-on investors seek. And this is extremely important for you to understand. Hopefully one day at least you'll have at least 10 startups. So you'll have at least the possibility to get future financiers on board for 10 startups. Now the founders most often have only that one. Or then they're second-time founders and they have 2. But they don't have the same possibilities of knowing this and of like building that know-how. So that is a very important know-how that you are bringing in to the board and to the founders. Remember what I said, I'm definitely not saying that every startup should take new investors on board. But it's extremely valuable, in my opinion, to know what it takes to get new investors on board. And that's, of course, should you take new investors, that's another discussion. But you support the team if you tell them who will invest at what stage of the business. So I think that's kind of your job to find out. Yeah, and that's what I said. Now we should have a best practices session that we don't actually have that much time to do. But and actually, because we had this, what is this in English? Flappitaulu. Why? It's not a whiteboard. A whiteboard is this hard thing.
It's paperboard.
Paperboard, exactly. But so I'd want to hear at least 5 metrics that you have used, either in startups or in your own business, to follow the business progressing, if you can find any good ones. And then, so that I'll learn as well. Anyone?
Number of clients or growth of the number of clients?
Growth. That is a good. Of course, in this case, it's important to specify what you mean with growth. Because if it's net growth or if it's the completely new ones, is a different thing. If 1 month your startup has 10 clients, customers, and then the next month they have 11. Now there's growth of 1. But it's a completely different scenario if they have all the 10 they had the previous month and 1 new.
Incremental.
Yes, incremental. And this is important in startups. Traditional businesses only look at increase or turnover or this kind of I don't know what the word to describe, but like changes. It has to do a lot with if you take a multinational corporation, well, whatever, then they probably have a pretty good track record of having a product market fit. And they have a good business. So it is 100% of executing that business model that they have. Then if they need to change their strategies, they'll call consultancy houses and they'll have board meetings in the Alps and whatever is necessary. And it will be like really a huge thing to change that business model in a multinational corporation. And that's why they only they're not stupid, it's definitely not that. But they can't change their business model that fast. So to them, it's a matter of execution. In startups, you want to see incremental growth because that gives you so much more signals on whether or not your business model is the right one, or whether or not you should change your business model. And if you have 10 customers and all stick with you and the next month you have 11, you should make different steps than if you have 10 customers, then 9 of them disappear, and then you get 10 new ones, so you have 11. Right? You should make different changes in your business model depending on which is the correct scenario. Sometimes it's something in between and it's difficult to say. But it is still important to look at the incremental growth of the number of clients because that helps you determine whether or not the business model that you are working on is the right one. Any other KPIs that you should, what do you think Heidi should be looking for in Fractory? What in 1 year's time when you'll sit here and have a glass, how do you know if she's done a good job? You'll only ask for turnover, right?
Repeat purchases. GMV or...
Repeat purchases, exactly, right? That's an excellent measure on a happy customer, right? Because, I mean, they can't be too unhappy if they repeat purchase. So, repeat purchases. That's why investors so often like SaaS businesses, right? Because in a SaaS model, whenever if it's a monthly subscription, you get that feedback. Because basically, they every month they tell you that, yes, we love you. Enough at least to pay your bill. And that's something. That's actually one of the reasons why I always kind of like, I almost want my startups to have just 1 month subscription periods instead of the 1 year, even though they might be able to charge that 1 year in advance. Because it's so difficult. Now if they go out and purchase a 1 year subscription, sell a 1 year subscriptions to their customers, it'll take 1 year until you know whether or not their customers were happy enough to renew. And that means that if you don't look at the Net Promoter Score or some other thing like that, you have no idea of knowing if they were actually really happy customers or if your sales guys were just, so effectively pushing your product through the door. So repeat customers.
And inbound versus outbound sales.
That's good. Do we need 2 more?
And monthly growth.
Monthly growth.
Yeah, monthly growth in percentage. So that's where the math comes out if I get my investment back.
Yeah, you should also. I agree. I mean, even though you should also know how big the pie is. But just be sure that usually it's still pennies, right? What kind of turnover does Fractory have at the moment?
Approximately 6,000 monthly.
6,000 monthly.
But it's not SaaS.
Yeah,
It's net.
it's net.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a hot dog stand,
It's not SaaS.
approximately. And that's just the thing. If you look at sales, you must remember that in 1 year's time, if Heidi has done a very, very good job, it could be even a chain of hot dog stands. It could be something like, in a year's time, something like 60 if she's done an excellent job, right?
We hope that it will be higher.
You hope? I know. I hope so too. I'm happy. I don't invest, but I'm happy for you if it is.
I have another question regarding that, because currently that 6,000 is not like the monthly recurring revenue, because they have a sort of a commission-based model.
Yeah.
And that's why the repeat purchases is even more important. But also I would say that the size of an average purchase is basically for them the most important criteria. Because if currently they are serving relatively small orders, we want them to serve large orders, so that the size of an average order and the number of repeat orders are basically the most critical
Yeah.
parameters for them.
Yeah. Exactly. That sounds good. But still, if you want the turnover to be a lot higher than 60,000 monthly, it's probably not going to it's not going to cover costs, probably. Just when we look at startups, people are really super happy when they have 10,000 monthly recurring revenue. And in a way, yeah, why not 10,000? But that's not even 2 hot dog stands. You should be happy to have 10,000 because it kind of also indicates that you might have some kind of product market fit. But the reason to stare at turnover is until it really makes you cash flow positive and you start making money like a real company. And when you start making money, then turnover is fun and then it's cool. But as long as you're still making a loss, then just looking at turnover is, because it might lead you to the wrong way. Of course I follow turnover in each and every one of my companies. Of course you do that. But it gets so easily under your skin and becomes the most important thing that you're looking at. That somehow subjectively you are telling the founder that product market fit is not important, sales is important, and don't hire new coders, hire new sales guys. And then you're making that number one mistake that startups do. You start scaling prematurely. You start selling crap because we live in a world where it's possible to paint something pink and sell it even though it's crap. Well, it's true. But it's not going to grow into a huge, fantastic business. So, but yes, you can look at sales. Runway. Do look at Runway as well. It is a startup, so in 1 year's time, factory will make a loss. And if they make a loss, it means that at some point their money will run out. And Runway is the estimation in months of when money will run out. And that's an important thing to know. I think we're good with these KPIs. Some pitfalls. Now, were there any founders here? No founders came. We're all investors.
Yeah, their car broke down on the road.
That's a shame. That's a shame. But good that they are spending your money on better things than cars. Oops.
They will need a new car.
Okay. Now, what are the pitfalls between an investor and a founder? Now, I didn't hear the pitch that Factory did. It was probably amazing because they won. Nowadays, they are quite often taught to say what you want to hear. And that means that quite often they lie. The bastards. The bastards lie. Many of the business plans are more like Nigerian scam letters than realistic scenario analysis.
Let's face it, if they would be completely realistic, all these founders, they would do something else.
Exactly. Or we would not invest in them because we think they're sore losers. So it's our fault, really. It really is. We are even more stupid than the ones who fall for Nigerian scam letters because we're telling them we won't fall for that scam unless you write it as a Nigerian scam letter, you know? How stupid is that? I never look at the turnover. Unfortunately, I really want to look at the costs. I think that every good entrepreneur knows that your cost structure, that you decide upon. So in all the business models, I really concentrate on the costs. But then the turnover hockey stick, and that is like whatever. But so that is a problem because now you've invested, and now Heidi is convinced that in 1 year's time they will have a lot more than 60,000 monthly turnover. They probably promise. How much did they promise you?
I don't remember. I never looked at those as real numbers.
No, you shouldn't look at them either. But I mean, yeah. But probably they want to be really optimistic, tell a really optimistic picture for you, and that's all right. It's our fault, but now we've invested, so now we need to think. How does that affect our relationship? You have promised that in 1 year's time you will have 100,000 monthly turnover. We both know that you won't have, but I wouldn't have invested in you if you wouldn't have lied. So how does that affect our relationship? So it's based on lies. And then another thing is that it's based on quite different incentives. The founders, they really do need your money. They can start paying themselves salaries when you invest. And you know what? If they're young founders, their mothers will be so proud, honestly. When they have a business where a genuine S-Bahn stamped business angel invests money in that company. They'll be so thrilled about that. So they have short-term incentives, right? They can start paying themselves salaries the next month. Their mamas will be proud. And that all happens the same instance as you invest. Now we remember from the first slides that your incentives, except from having a fun job and being able to call yourself an angel, you know, that's cool. But your incentives are like 10 years apart. Your incentives, you'll get to that exit. Well, for VCs it was 6.8, and I didn't find any current. I found a few years later statistics. But it's 7, 8, 9 years on average. And then you might get multiples of your money back. And the good thing with Fiban, at least, that statistics tell us that we have the bank on our side. Many lose money, but on average, it's a good investment. But it's all long term. So, this is not an ideal place to build trust, right? And I have not, in 10 out of 10 cases, been able to build trust between the founder teams and me. Sometimes I have thought that they wanted my networks, they wanted my skill, they wanted my know-how, and then after the investment, I'm guessing all they wanted was my money. The bastards. That's all right. It's part of the game, it's part of the fun. But you need to understand that, and if you really, really want to help them and you want to support them, then you need to establish trust. And that's sort of the thing where I get annoyed the most, because I honestly believe that I have so much to give. But if there's no trust, then you know that you're talking to them and they're looking at you and they're thinking, man, you're more than 30 or even older than 40 now. Why would we listen to you? And then it's like, okay. So, because this is the situation where you're entering, make sure to go that extra mile to build trust between the founders and investors. Then you actually do need to align the incentives as well as possible. Because the good thing is that after investment, the incentives gets so much more equal. It's true, they have started paying themselves salaries, but that's okay. That's like a sunk cost. They're already doing that. The upside is mostly aligned to the same thing as you. And that helps when you build the trust between the founders and the investors, that you can really try and explain them that, look, now your mother knows I invested and you've started paying salaries. Now our incentives are pretty well aligned. And in that way, you can come up with good faith between founders and investors. And then you can really support them. These are pitfalls. Now, this was a shorter presentation. These are some of the pitfalls which I've felt when I've invested. So, let's talk about the financial projections. Now, what kind of financial projections should you receive from founders? We only have short amount of time, so let's make it just a quick Q&A. But I'd like to hear your opinions on it, because it really is silly, isn't it, that we demand these kind of hockey sticks from them which aren't realistic. But is it still? Or what do we want to hear? What kind of financial projections do we want to hear from the founders? Cost projections. Exactly. We do want them to understand that the 170,000 that you've invested into Factory compared with the 6,000 monthly revenue that they have now. I'm guessing that 6,000 has some cost, so it's not 6,000 in the bank. You need to calculate that one. But after that, it's up to them to decide what to do with the money. So having a really good cost plan is important. Did Factory have a good cost plan? No. Do you know how much of that 6,000 is left under the...
They had the runway for a couple of months now, and
From where did that runway come from?
they have had already some investment
Okay.
made in, so that they have taken in like around 50,000. And the cost projections are like dummies.
Yeah? What do you mean?
These are dummy numbers, so that there is no actual contents behind those numbers. So
Yeah. It could be, as it quite often is, these are engineers, these aren't economists. I used to be an auditor. That's one of my dark secrets.
no way.
Yes, it's true. For Ernst & Young, I was an auditor. And I love Excel. I think it's one of the fantastic programs that is made life so easy. Most of the time, the founders don't agree with me, so they don't have that one. But it really helps because that runway is so important. At least they knew that they had a 2-month runway. So at least if that 2-month runway was correct, then that one should be. But what kind of other things do we want in a pitch? And I'm talking mostly in a pitch that could convince. I mean, and this is a pure question. I have no idea, but I'm just curious. I'd love it if we could just throw that hockey stick in the garbage can and really ask them some serious questions about growth. Is it some kind of total acquirable market, you know, this TAM, SAM, SOM, or what are they? Would that help? And does that tell you anything? Because for me, it doesn't.
It's rather the question that whether there is an opportunity in the market at all, so that you do the very quick and dirty calculation and figure out that actually the market is too small just to gain any like significant cash flow from that market, so that it's just not worth of proceeding anyway.
Yeah.
But that part that they know at least that the market is large enough for their business, they have. But it's just if you think that, I always ask that, how? So that if you say that that's my reachable top market share, then I would definitely ask how. So that if you show me just the nice large numbers, I won't be convinced by that.
But it must be a really excruciating way of calculating, you know, total acquirable market. It's so difficult. You had a comment.
I have asked typically like the near-term numbers, the very near-term, like 3 months, maybe 6 months, and also with some color or details. Like
which customers?
If you plan to do this, which customers are, what is your experiment that you're going to run? And then after 6 months you can check, was it really done or not? You can follow up easily on the short-term thing. Long-term thing is crap anyway, but the short-term thing should be more or less.
It's like a Scrum model in these terms. So you do a series of tests, like hypothesis-based tests. If the first one will somehow reflect that with a positive result, then you do the next one. And it's like rolling over all the time.
That's true. I've started in my later investments to try and like imagine what company it would be like. And then I try to think, I mean, which listed company would it be like? And then I try to think of the market share of that one. And there's this fun, everyone in Finland loves Genelec because they are really cool loudspeakers, you know. And there was this fun loudspeaker loudspeaker manufacturer startup, and you know, friends from Fiban were pumped up saying that this is really a fantastic, you know, this can be the new Genelec. But you know, the problem with Genelec is that it's a really cool loudspeaker brand, but it has a turnover of 21 million. So if the star that you're aiming for, if that really like the dream come true, would be that you'd have a company with a 21 million turnover, the probability of you ending up with something smaller is so high. And if the Americans have a good saying, how does it go? You know, you must aim for the stars to reach the moon. It goes something like that, isn't it? And that's a fantastic saying for startups, you know. If the stars are there at 21 million euro turnover, then it's not like, oh.
If you're lucky one.
Well, if you're lucky.
Because the
Yeah.
average exit size for the VC-backed startups in Europe is around 20 million.
Yeah. And I don't know what the I mean, Genelec is not a listed corporation. It's as a Finnish corporation. I know things like turnover is easy to find out, but you don't know because it's not listed. So I wouldn't know what the profit is. But I mean, usually it's only something for an unlisted company. It's usually something around 5 times profits. Or for Genelec have a good brand, I think they might even go up to 10, even though it's not a listed company. So then it would be roughly 20 million company. But so in pitch, what we should kind of like more look at, so we should, did we come to some kind of conclusion? What should I write here? I don't know. We don't know what to look in a pitch. I don't have like a magic formula. So if you send me an email if you if you figure out.
So do you look at financials in the pitch at all? You leave them aside?
No, definitely. I mean, at the cost structure at least, and the cost projections. And then, of course, I look carefully at what customers they have at the moment. And then that's an excellent idea, which I've actually done afterwards with some when we do financial projections, is that we really, and on a turnover basis, we do a customer by customer projection. And that really helps. Of course, that can be difficult to put in a pitch, but that is something that you can do in an investment discussion. So there are some things that I'd like to go through, and I don't know if you've been taught about this before, because this is not enough to go through the shareholders agreement, but there are some things in some clauses in the shareholders agreement that specifically affect the relationship between a founder and the investor. So I'd like to go through them. There's vesting, there's good liver, bad liver clauses, liquidation preference, and then there are certain decisions in the shareholders agreements. Fiban has at least a standard shareholders agreement. I'm sure Esteban also has. My guess is that they are quite similar, even though unfortunately I haven't looked at yours. So vesting is one of my favorite subjects, because vesting is so clearly misunderstood. Now it's true, I did tell you I was an auditor for Ernst & Young. I wasn't a partner, but at one time I was like dreaming of becoming a partner at Ernst & Young. Now what they do there is, if we have a valuation of any company here, and say here I'm selected partner, I buy myself in with this valuation. Then you work there for a few years until here you work for 5 years, then you're done with it, and they buy you out with this valuation. So the value you get is the increase in value that has happened during your time at the company. And that's a fair deal, right? You hand out shares in the beginning, they pay for that valuation, and then when you leave, the company buys them back for the valuation at that moment. You're compensated for the added value that you did. Usually it's a book value if we're talking old school consultancy firms, but you can of course also use market values like latest investment rounds if you wish. The thing with startups is I see these 3-year vesting periods done here. Now, Uber just put out a press release that they made a profit. Congratulations, Uber. It's a fantastic company and I'd love to own shares. And it's only actually, I think it's around 11 years old. So it's not that old even. And there was just this article, and I remember it was $26 billion in financing that they had. So think, their value of death, that was 11 years and 26 billion, I think, in size. And that's a fantastic value of death. And man, if I would own just a fraction of that share. In 2010, their first funding round was I think it was 1.6 million at a valuation of 5.4 million. I think if you would have gotten in with that valuation, you'd be a happy camper now. There's some like comparisons for Factory to achieve. Now the thing is that in most cases, when this valuation, it can easily be $1 million, right? And a founder can have what, 40%. So god damn it, the value of their shares is 400,000 euros. Now here they decide to leave in the middle of the valley of death. Do you think you have 400,000 to pay that founder? Or do you think when Heidi calls you up and says, look, this one guy at Factory wants to leave and we want to buy back his shares, so we need 400,000 to do that. Would you be happily paying? No, you wouldn't. Which means he gets to keep the shares, right? Which is like 40% perhaps of the entire share. Now the exit starts there around 6 years. Now it starts there around 6 years and it can go all the way here to 11, 12, whatever. And it can be, of course, really high. It can be, hell, I think Uber's was $62 billion, the latest valuation. So it can be really the valuation somewhere up there. So we have a fantastic situation. Unfortunately, this means that there is a huge amount of unearned value creation that this founder can get. I'm happy for other people making money. So it's not that I'd be jealous. It's not that. At least I hope it's not that. The thing is, if we have these founders with more than 10% of ownership in the cap table, everyone investing after you will see them as worthless stock. They're not contributing anything anymore. And that's a drag. And it will most probably mean that their share in the cap table will need to be reduced. If you don't have the 400,000, it could mean that it will have to be reduced, for instance, with stock options to the remaining founders. But that, of course, means then that you will be diluted in the same amount as the leavers. And that sucks. So, and well, this of course you all know, this isn't anything new, but what I tend to be surprised about, which most investors don't seem to realize, is that by giving them a 3-year vesting period, you actually give them an incentive to leave. And this is very important, in my opinion, for you to understand. If you write a 3-year vesting period, you create an incentive for them to leave, because they could go to another startup, and there they could get shares as well. So these shares that have been vested during they will continue developing positively, right? At least if it's not all on them, but it's not all on one person anyway. So this value creation they will get even though they're working for that other startup. And they do think about it. I hear in coffee table talks all the time. They'll say, I'll just wait a few months and then my 3-year vesting period has run out and then I'll jump to another startup. So it's really important that you understand vesting the right way. It's really important for you to understand that vesting means that you give them an economic incentive to jump ship at this time. And that's okay. I mean, if you have a CTO that you're like recruiting, that means that you can't give him 10% and a 3-year vesting. You give him 2% and a 3-year vesting. Because then you must remember that after 2.5 years, you need to give him 2% more, right? Because otherwise you have just given someone, you have given away shares in order to give them the economic incentive to leave. And that's stupid, right? So what you do is at least on a minimum is that some founder just got angry and started banging. Don't say that. Well, so at least when you do incentive programs with vesting periods, one easy solution is that you chain them after one another so that you can build all the way here to the exit. But you can't give 10% here in that case, because after 2.5 years they'll want 11% because they're so much more experienced. And then you've given away 21%. And then here, just before this, they'll want 15%. And with a clause that if you get the exit, it vests all at once. So make sure that you have thought about vesting in a right way. Yes, good. Which comes to good leaver, bad leaver clauses. Now, good leaver, of course, is the way in a shareholders agreement where you say that if a person is good leaver, he gets to keep his vested shares and maybe even gets to sell back his shares at a good price. And a bad leaver is usually forced to sell back all shares at original price. Now, can founders really be good leavers? Right? It's a good question. I've actually written my latest shareholders agreement was that it's a bad leaver clause if a founder leaves the company. And I suggest you do the same. And I always tell the team that this is for the team. Because the team doesn't understand. They think that I'm some kind of crazy investor. But I always try to tell them that I'm not taking anything away from your fantastic CTO. I don't want to, he's a fantastic guy and I don't want to take anything away from your fantastic CTO. It's only if he turns out to be an asshole and leaves that I want to take away his shares. And this is like a discussion that's important for you as investors to discuss with the founder teams. That it's really bad for those who leave, for those who stay, if the ones who leave can walk away with tens of percentages of the company.
Have you been able to sign such agreements where founder leaving is always bad leaver?
Yeah, I have.
For like 3 or 4 years?
No. It's always a bad lever.
Always a bad leaver.
Always a bad lever.
Do you think to keep this person not motivating in the company isn't a good?
Well, I mean, it's not vested, so. I mean, yeah, you mean if he turns out to be an asshole, but he refuses to leave, but then, let's face it, you give them 5%. I mean, because that's the way it goes, right? Then you sit down and then you discuss. And then you give them 5%, and maybe they have like, it's okay for them to get 5%. But I mean, what I have done also in my investments is I've gone to co-founders who have left, and I have discussed that I want to buy back your shares. And I'm not going to give you 400,000. I'm going to give you 5,000. And you need to sell them back. And I've done that as well. And they've sold. And I've told them that I think they're assholes if they don't sell. And it has worked. So maybe that's a solution as well. The thing is, I mean, you find yourself your own solution, but just remember that vesting periods actually give economic incentives to leave, and it's really, really difficult to get external financing and keep personnel motivated if a founder who's left owns 10%, tens of percentages of the company. So remember that. Liquidation preference is also something that is, of course, important for you to know. Now, here's a scenario where seed investors have invested 100,000 with a 1 million post-money valuation, and then a small Nordic A round, 500,000 with a 2 million post-money valuation has been invested. Then, of course, that has diluted your original 10% to 8%, and then the founders are left with 67% because these get 25%, of course. So liquidation preference is good for you to understand that if you go in with 1 million, these go in with 2 million, and there's no liquidation preference, then if you get a 500,000 exit, these guys get 335,000, seed investors get 40,000, and these investors get 125. And then, of course, with the 1 million, 2 million, and 4 million exit. And of course, the valuation must be more than 2 million if these are to be in the green as well. The thing with liquidation preferences, though, the reason why they should be used is not this, that this guy is still in the yellow here with a 2 million exit, and everyone else and all investors are in the red if the exit is smaller. The thing is that what you should be careful about is this 335,000 with a 500,000 exit. Now, remember that the founders are still paying salaries for them all the time. So 335,000, that's a really nice bonus. If there's two of them and they split it, it's a really, really nice bonus. But it's a situation where everyone else is really screwed. So I picked up liquidation preference, that you understand how it changes the game so that it gives them incentives for large exits. And that is still a very important thing with startups. I mean, we are aiming for the stars. So make sure that you have liquidation preferences. Be careful of non-participating liquidation preferences, because I've seen VCs wanting non-participating liq prefs, but only for them, which kind of sucks for the ones who doesn't get it. But so this was like one important thing for you to understand, how liquidation preference is used to incentivize founders to think big. Because otherwise they could be quite happy even thinking small. And so liquidation preference is most often not used because people want to improve their returns. It's the main reason why you use liquidation preferences is because you want to incentivize founders to think big, and thereby aligning your incentives.
I think in Estonia, one-time participating or normal is quite standard.
Yes, that's standard in Finland as well. One-time participating, which means that you get it first, and then they sort of start filling up. So they, in this case, would get the 400,000. I mean, you would get all of this, and then these would get everything that is left. So yeah. And then certain decisions. Now, I don't know if you have this Series Seed in Estonia as well, but Series Seed is this Series C.fi. It's Aalto University and the Entrepreneurship Society of Aalto University, together with different startup actors who have made shareholders agreement as a model for everyone to use. They have a clause which says certain decisions. Now where I'm really tight on vesting and where I'm really tight on bad lever clauses, I think that most of these are quite often really ridiculous. I've seen shareholders agreements where the majority of investors must approve every investment into fixed assets that are above 20,000 euros. You know, what's 20,000 euros? You renovate, I don't know. But I mean, really, you can't put that kind of micromanagement into certain decisions. So make sure to be careful not to micromanage the founder teams with placing ridiculous certain decisions clauses. I mean, think about it. This is Aalto Entrepreneurship Society. And there's even, in my opinion here, it requires approval of the majority of investors if they want to hire or fire any working shareholders or amend the terms of service or employment agreements of the working shareholders. So they have just hired a sales guy and given him as incentives, a few stocks. And this Series Seed shareholders agreement stipulates that if you want to amend the employment agreement of that sales guy, you'd have to ask for permission of the majority of investors. Now that's a really ridiculous thing. So make sure you don't micromanage with certain decisions in there. There are some good ones, of course. I mean, like this, if they want to sell, merge, demerge, liquidate, or dissolve the company, including any liquidation event, or sell shares or something like that. I mean, that is really. But even this one, issue, redeem, purchase, or otherwise acquire or sell or otherwise transfer any shares, makes building an option contract a lot more difficult to document correctly. Not impossible, but just I think that this in Finland, and I'm sure in Estonia as well, for instance, getting new option contracts usually requires a majority vote in both in the board of directors and the annual general meeting. So many of these are really irrelevant. Now, I've actually gone 5 minutes past my time, so I don't know if we have time to discuss 5 minutes on the shareholders agreement. But could you just quickly, shout out your comments on the shareholders agreements? Now, if you're first time investing into Fractory, have you actually read the shareholders agreement?
We don't have it yet.
You don't have it yet?
We haven't had it before.
Good.
So, and now we are just compiling the shareholders agreement.
Good. I have a reading suggestion here, but don't read this one if Heidi has the Esteban that she will use. As a reading suggestion, read through that shareholders agreement.
But it's not very much different of that what you.
It's probably not. But it's just that if you're going with that one anyway, it's no point for you to read this one. Sometimes the wording is done in quite different ways. For instance, vesting is sometimes.
It's called reverse vesting in these terms because the founders usually have the share already.
Yeah.
And you say that despite of the fact that you are legally owning the share, you are not owning it really because until you leave, you will lose it.
Yeah.
But
So
it's just
the same thing in just different ways of expressing it. But so really that could be a good thing to read. All right. Now I don't know if this was, but this was all I have. I hope it was of use. So thank you, and there's my contact details. You can send me feedback, you can send me a LinkedIn, do whatever you want. And I hope you all the best with the Fractory. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
do you have still time for a couple of questions?
Yes, my ferry leaves at 19:30,
Okay.
7:30.
So what type of startups do you invest currently in or with Spinnaker?
Yes, Spinnaker Ventures. We will be Finland's first artificial intelligence VC fund. So we will look for business models which gains the most out of artificial intelligence. Then we have a team of really the coolest artificial intelligence researchers and consultants from Finland. And we help those startups to actually develop real artificial intelligence. The idea is that it's pre-seed, and we give them 100,000, to develop that AI. I mean, of course, we also look at things like entrepreneurial spirit in the founder teams and disruptive business idea. But if those things match, and we can, with 100,000, really start developing functional AI in that service, then I think we have gotten quite a lot of added value. And then we have these new larger VC funds in Finland who then can use their financial leverage to really scale them internationally.
So that you do around 100,000 tickets? 100,000?
Well, we have a due diligence ticket around 100,000. Then we can invest into up to 3 million into one startup. So, but really the added value that we bring is that we can identify, because we have these really amazing advisors behind us, so we can really both identify the best business models and help them to further develop it with our funds. And I think that the market dynamics at this very moment is that if you have that kind of business idea and you have a real artificial intelligence solution, then valuations have gone up hopefully 3-4 times until some bigger VC fund comes and gets them. And then of course we have left quite a lot to co-invest with them, so we gain the same value increase as those as well.
Just one more question. Recently I have heard that despite of the fact that the startup valuations in Europe has started also to increase, that in Finland they are still on a relatively low level if compared to other parts of Europe. So how do you feel? Whether it's a sort of a valid comment from founder's side? Or?
Well, I'm really scared about that because, you know, I mean, it's actually, I'm a bit embarrassed about the hotness of the topic of our VC fund. And I'm a bit afraid that a lot of founders are using artificial intelligence, for instance, as a gimmick to boost hype and to boost valuations. And if there's only hype that adds valuation, then business logic must kind of tell you that eventually it goes for a worse investment. Now, the way I see it, and I think this goes for all business angels as well, that you need to add value and you need to be a good guy. Because if you add value as a good guy, they want you to invest. They don't want to have just your money. And you don't want to be in the startup world that guy who only gives out money. Because in those cases, they will try to pump out, you know, you're gonna haggle if you know, you're investing 30K, and then they'll be like, yeah, but the valuation needs to be 4 million. And so I think that problem, the best way to minimize that problem is by adding value and really working professionally so that you have a reputation. I mean, good guy, I don't mean that, I mean, I have argued with founders and I have changed CEOs when I felt necessary to do so. So I don't mean good guy as an easy guy, but I mean a good guy in a way that you don't, I mean, you answer their emails and kind of good guy, that you're professional in what you do. Because otherwise you'll fall back to that, you know, last resort for money, or that, you know, last resort for as high a valuation as possible. And you don't want to be in either places. You want to be that guy who the best teams calls. You know, the guys who founded Supercell, they never called me. So I never had the chance to invest in Supercell. I don't know if the next Supercell, I hope they would call. I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't mind me investing in the next Supercell. But it's really important for every startup who wants to do that. You need to build your reputation to get the best deal flow. Otherwise, you'll never get a chance to invest. Yeah. Any other questions?
Is this a working web page Spinnaker? Because actually...
No, it's not working. We're under the radar. They told us that that's how you sell these VCs. I've never sold a VC fund before. So we have Tekes or Business Finland. They have committed 6 million into our fund, but they told me that you're actually supposed to sell a VC fund so that you don't market it to anyone. I don't know how you actually do that, but apparently that's the way they told me. So we haven't, Spinnaker.fi is not, but it works, the email though.
Okay.
It is registered.
Marketing works in a way that you mention that you have a VC fund, but you are not proposing that you are going to send your proposal, for example, or your information memorandum, and the other party then has to ask for it. Would you send it to me?
Yeah.
And then you haven't marketed it, but you just share the information.
Yeah. Legally, that's what you have to do with the Americans. You're really in trouble with their financial authority if you start sending it. But I don't see the point in doing it otherwise. But apparently that's how you market these kind of. It is more easier to sell loudspeakers and AV equipment that I have a background in doing. But
The active investment in AI?
sorry?
By this fund, they already did investments?
No, we have target to have the fund up and running after September. So
The target size of the fund will be around like 15 million or something?
20. Yeah. First closing will be. So if anyone would have, all I need, our minimum ticket is 250,000. So if someone has 250,000, it's a commitment over 10 years. So it's like roughly around 40,000 a year. So if anyone would want to invest into an AI fund, then call that number. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.